Hi everyone, Peter here from Flow High Performance. In this presentation, we're going to be continuing our video series on the fundamentals of periodization, and this one is going to be on planning the mesocycle. So first we need to establish what we're referring to when we talk about the mesocycle, and essentially there's going to be different definitions from different sources depending on where you look. But for the sake of this video and this video series, we're going to refer to the mesocycle as basically a block of training. And a block of training is usually going to encompass some sort of overloading period followed by a deload period. So if we have a look at this graph here, this is a really simplistic way of how we would plan a mesocycle. So this blue line on this graph is visually going to represent the training load throughout a mesocycle. So in week 1, we start at a base training load. We then progressively overload week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4 until we reach our peak overload or our peak training load, and we're then going to have in the final week of the training block or the mesocycle basically a training load that is less than what we started with. So we're not presenting an overload, we are going through a deload period, which is going to help us recover and adapt from the previous training so we can then present more progressive overload in the subsequent training block. So what are we going to plan during the mesocycle? From the previous video, we left off here having the annual plan created, and then we went through some phase potentiation where we split the year up into different phases. And the 3 general phases that we split the year up into was the accumulation phase, the intensification phase, and the realization phase. And they were spread out throughout the year depending on where we need to peak. So in these phases, because some of them are quite long, for example, this one is around 12 weeks, we can split that up into 3 or 4 mesocycles, since 12 weeks of overload is too long of a period to actually continue to make progress. So depending on which phase the mesocycle is in, we're going to have different ways that we're going to plan the mesocycle. So in an accumulation phase, we're going to have a mesocycle that is going to be progressing in volume with a maintenance of intensity. In an intensification mesocycle, we're going to have a progression of intensity and a maintenance in volume. So basically the complete opposite of the accumulation block. And then in the realization or the peaking phase, the mesocycles during this phase are going to be progressing in intensity and also reducing in volume at the same time. And this is going to allow peak intensity with minimal fatigue. We also have to make sure that when we're planning the mesocycle, we apply our deload periods appropriately in order to make sure that we are managing our fatigue. So here are some examples of how we can practically apply the principles of planning the mesocycle. So I've got here an accumulation block, an intensification block, and a realization block. And I've applied the same exercises so we can see how they can differentially be programmed. So in the accumulation block, I've picked here 1 speed exercise, 1 power exercise, 1 strength exercise, and 1 conditioning or endurance exercise in order to apply these principles to different forms of training. So the first one, 3-point start, so basically just a sprint from a 3-point start. In an accumulation block, if we're going to work on acceleration, for example, we might have 3 sets of 1 20-meter sprint, so 3 20-meter sprints with appropriate rests, and then over the course of 3 weeks we're going to add a set to each, so 3 sets, 4 sets, 5 sets, while we're maintaining the intensity, so the intensity is going to be dictated by the distance. And then in the last week we're going to have less volume than the first week to have a deload period. For power exercise, medicine ball throw, for example, 3 sets of 5 reps with 5 kilo medicine ball. We're going to do the same thing, we're just going to add a set each week, and then in the last week where we have a deload, we are going to reduce the sets to less than the first week in order to recover and adapt. Strength exercise, exactly the same thing, 3 sets of 6 at 100 kilos. We're going to maintain the reps and the intensity, but we're just going to add sets in order to increase the volume, and then in the deload period, reduce the volume again. Same thing here, so interval runs, I'll just explain this quickly. So we'll have 20 seconds of work followed by 20 seconds of rest. So that's going to be 120 meters here in 20 seconds, and then we're going to have 20 seconds rest, and we're going to do that 6 times. So first week we might do 6 runs, we might do then 7 runs in the second week, 8 runs, and then week 4 we have a deload, we're going to do 5 runs. So now I've got the same exercises here, but this time we're going to have an intensification block. So we're going to program this slightly differently. So same exercises, this time our 3-point start, we're going to do 3 sets of 1 at 30 meters. So we can do 3 30-meter sprints. This time we're going to maintain the volume. So same sets, same reps, but this time we're going to increase the intensity. So now the intensity is going up, basically dictated by the distance. So further distance is going to mean we're going to reach higher velocities, and therefore the intensity is going to be higher, or at least more specific to what we're training for if we're training for maximum speed. So 30 meters, 35 meters, then 40 meters, and then basically in this deload period we're going to maintain that intensity that we reach, but then we're going to reduce the volume. So the volume stays the same, but the intensity goes up. Medicine ball throws, we're going to do a similar thing here. So 3 sets of 4 at 6 kilos. Then we're going to do 3 sets of 4 at 5 kilos, 3 sets of 4 at 4 kilos, and 2 sets of 4 at 4 kilos. So basically same volumes, but this time we're going to add intensity. And the reason I've done this with descending weight as opposed to ascending weight is because generally speaking, most sports or most things that we're training for, it's more specific to move lighter implements with faster velocities. So essentially throwing 4 kilos is going to be faster than throwing 6 kilos, and the intensity is going to be more specific to the sport. Back squat, so our strength exercise, 3 sets of 5 at 100 kilos, 3 sets of 5 at 105 kilos, 3 sets of 5 at 110 kilos. Almost the most basic form of progressive overload, just keeping the reps and sets the same and adding load. And then in the final week again, we're going to drop the volume and maintain that high intensity that we did. Interval runs, similar sort of thing here. 6 sets of 1 at 120 meters. Then we're going to do 6 sets of 125 meters. So we're going to have to run at a slightly faster pace here. 6 sets of 1 at 130 meters in the final intensification week, followed by a reduction in volume with a maintenance of intensity. So it goes from 6 sets down to 4 sets. And finally, we have the realization block. Again, we're going to have the same exercises here, but this time what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the volume while subsequently increasing the intensity, and this is going to really help us to perform at our peak when it counts. So this time in week 4, instead of having a deload, we have a taper. So a taper is going to be essentially the same thing, but the purpose of a deload is to reduce fatigue, whereas the purpose of a taper is to reach peak performance, which is going to include reductions in fatigue, but it's designed to allow us to perform at our best. So 3-point start, this time we're going to go 5 sets of 1 at 40 meters, followed by 4 sets of 1 at 45 meters, followed by 3 sets of 1 at 50 meters, followed by 2 sets of 1 at 55 meters. So the distance is increasing, so the intensity is increasing, while the sets, so the volume is dropping off. Medicine ball throw, same thing here. 5 sets, 4 sets, 3 sets, 2 sets, same reps, but this time we're going to decrease the load simultaneously. So 6 kilos, 5 kilos, 4 kilos, 3 kilos. And again, as we mentioned, this is going to be increase in specific intensity based on what we're training for. Back squat, 4 sets of 3 at 120 kilos, 3 sets of 3 at 125 kilos, 2 sets of 3 at 130, 1 set of 3 at 135 kilos. So as we can see, sets are going down, so reducing volume, while the intensity is going up. Interval runs, same idea here. 8 sets, 7 sets, 6 sets, 5 sets, but we're going to increase the distance simultaneously again, 120 meters, 125 meters, 130, 135. So in this week here, we should have the least volume, so we're slowly diminishing fatigue by dropping off volume, but our intensity is going up, so we should be performing at our best here in week 4. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you got something out of this video. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already.